Okay, welcome back to Hindustan Astrology. I'm Katya, and today I have on a very special guest to my YouTube channel, Dr. Katy Jane. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hello, everybody. So happy to be here. I'm really excited. You're such a soul sister.
Well, I saw her on Instagram, and it was like this bright light was just shooting out of her posts. It was so positive, and so right on. And she's a Sanskrit teacher and scholar. And so reading her posts about, dissecting the words that in astrology we all use, but maybe we don't understand the hidden esoteric meanings. I just was like, wow, this woman is so cool. And I went to her website and I saw that, she not only is an astrologer, but I mean, she's this incredible scholar with her PhD, and she teaches courses. And in fact, she's starting one tomorrow. And so I thought, what a great opportunity to have her on to introduce her to everybody and tell us about the work she does.
Thank you so much. This is so great. Yes, we're on to Diwali, which is the new moon in the Vedic month of Kartik. So yes, I'm offering a free Vedic masterclass tomorrow night, 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it's all on the inner significance of Diwali.
Right. And now this is based on Lakshmi, the goddess Lakshmi, right?
Yes, it's all about Lakshmi's arrival from Patal, where she dwells, the underworld. So it's the return of the light from the dark. And I mean, there's a lot of things I'll be discussing related to her appearance and the myth that tells the significance of Diwali night in my class. But it's such a potent time of the year for reflecting on your inner wealth, on wealth in general. Lakshmi means wealth, but we can measure wealth in 8 different ways. It's not just money in the bank. You can have money in the bank, but then you may feel disempowered, or you may not have any descendants, or you may not have good food to eat, or you may have health issues. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to be wealthy. And this is what Diwali gives us the opportunity to measure. It's a holiday that in the cities and in the marketplaces, it's really celebrated as a merchant's, closeout final end of the year celebration, in which you really take a inventory of all that you've lost and all that you've gained. And it's accompanied by gambling the night away. It's really fun. This is in the cities, in northern India, in the state of Uttar Pradesh, where my in-laws live. It's Lady Luck, is she and the way that you win at gambling really shows your financial trend for the year. But there's a deeper significance to Diwali that is embodied in the meaning and the symbolism of the Kartik new moon. Kartik is such a sacred month, especially for the Vedas, because the Kartik, the constellation is the Pleiades. And each one of those stars is one of the Shaktis of the Vedic rishis. So Kartik is a potent month for getting in touch with that source that's at the basis of everything. That is symbolized by Patal, the underworld, where Lakshmi makes her ascent on her white owl on the night of Diwali. And everybody has their doors open and their lights on, and the footsteps are painted, or nowadays people have stickers, but they place the footsteps showing Lakshmi how to enter the house. In case she might forget. So that's that symbol of the 2 feet, which is Uttarabhadrapada in Vedic astrology. Those are the feet of Lakshmi, the lucky feet. And it's connected with, I hear Budanya energy, the serpent of the deep. So she comes out of, our deep, dark place, our deep shadow self, and steps forward into the light of the home, into the light of the heart.
Wow.
So anyway, I'll be talking more about Diwali tomorrow night.
Uttara Bhadrapada, that's Venus is exalted in Pisces. So would this be a connection between Lakshmi and Shukra?
Yeah, definitely. Because Uttara Bhadrapada in any case has a connection with Lakshmi, but then you put Venus in there, and it's like the explosion of the material benefits of Lakshmi. Usually Venus in that situation makes somebody famous, makes them materially wealthy. Billionaires. Yeah, it's a really sweet beauty mark in a chart to have Venus exalted in Pisces like that.
Yeah.
And that would represent like a huge win, a big, huge Diwali win.
Right. So Diwali, we were talking before, actually starts November 3rd, you said, or 2nd?
Yes, there's two holidays. There's Choti Diwali, which means little Diwali, and then there's Diwali. And these are astronomically calculated moments. Choti Diwali's, and then there's Dhanteras, which is when people buy metal. I think Dhanteras comes before Choti Diwali, then there's Choti Diwali, then there's Diwali. So Dhanteras is when you buy gold. It's auspicious to buy gold or any kind of silver, metal, anything, pots and pans for the house kind of thing. And there's sales everywhere. It's like the blowout Dhanteras sales. And then Choti Diwali, people have parties. And then Diwali itself happens at a particular astrological moment, like the exact moment of the new moon, entrance of the new moon, signaling the start of Kartik. And that's when everybody gathers. And they may never have chanted an invocation to Lakshmi and any of the days of the year. People get their papers with a puja written on it, and they're stumbling along, like Catholics in church.
Yeah.
And yet the whole community, in every house, everybody at that exact moment is invoking Lakshmi, come into my house, come into my house.
Wow.
And there's a lot of esoteric significance about that is, I think, fascinating. But then following that comes the firecrackers and the parties and the fun and
the powder, right? The colored powder.
No, colored powder is holy. That's a different. That comes in the spring. Diwali is all the lighting of the diya, the little candles, and eating mithai, sweets, and getting dressed up, festive. Like everybody's really festively attired. Everybody's got lights, like Christmas lights, all over their house. And rangoli, which is this beautiful, design made out of rice flour that they put in front of the house, the entrance of the house, and candles. And then at least in my in-laws family, we gamble the night away if I'm with them. If I'm with my villagers, if I'm where I live in Dunagiri in the Himalayas, we have a totally different kind of Diwali. And that's more aligned with, I would say, like Diwali of yesteryear. So anyway.
Wow, that's fascinating. So What are the two places that you have in India with your in-laws? You said one is in the
So
city, one's in the mountains.
yeah, so I'm married to an Indian. His name is Piyush Kumar, and the two of us run a retreat center in a place called Dunagiri in the Kumaon side of Uttarakhand, and we're right opposite Mahavatar Babaji's cave. Those people that know of Autobiography of a Yogi and the story of how Kriya Yoga came to the West, um, recognize the value of Dunagiri because that cave is featured in there prominently, and the meeting of Yogananda's guru's guru, Lahiri Mahashai, who was told by this immortal yogi named Babaji that his disciple would bring yoga to the West and transform the world. And eventually yoga would return, the spiritual knowledge would then return to India. And this was all foretold in this cave opposite where we live. Anyway, so we run a retreat center in this community. We also have an ancient goddess temple there. It's called a goddess, a Shakti Pita, which a Shakti Pita means a seat of power, like a vortex. And this has been recognized as a seat of Shakti for, at least since the time of the Ramayana.
Wow.
And she is goddess Vaishnavi. And so we have that temple. So it's a really remote, beautiful, sacred place that we live in. And we try to really restore the authentic way of living there. And then my husband has his family in the Delhi area, the NCR, they call it, the National Capital Region. And his mom is still living. So we like to spend the holidays, especially Diwali. Diwali is like Christmas. I mean, I hate to make that comparison because it's not at all like Christmas, but it's like Christmas in the sentiment of people like that they want to be home with their family and celebrating in that kind of way.
Right. Well, and the return of the light. I mean, honestly,
and the return of the
that's
light.
where Christmas came from.
Yes.
I mean, it was already,
totally.
Saturnalia and all of that. So it
completely. Yeah. It's a solstice like festival. It also coincides with the harvesting of the sugar cane.
Oh,
and that's
wow.
why you'll oftentimes see Lakshmi with sugar cane. And so it has that sweetness to it that, we're harvesting, like not only physically the sugar cane, but the sugar cane within us. Like what sweetness have we been able to savor in this year? That's also why mithai is such a big deal. Like the sweets at Diwali are outrageous.
Wow. So sweet. So that would be Guru, Jupiter. He rules sugar. Does he have anything to do with this holiday?
I think Venus rules sugar.
Well, I've heard that Venus is actually sour and Jupiter is sweet because Jupiter, if you're diabetic, your Jupiter is afflicted in your chart. So I have always been taught that sugar was Jupiter and sour was
Venus.
Because sour actually makes sweet taste sweeter. So
yeah, it's like in Ayurveda, it's called the vipaka, the after effect. Like when you take lemons, it's actually alkaline instead of sour. That's a vipaka. Right. But I don't know, because I've always heard the reverse. I mean, not about diabetes, I've heard that, but I've always thought of Venus as sugar cane and places where sugar cane grows. I don't know. So maybe somebody's listening can
did too, because in Arabic, sugar is sukar.
Yeah,
S-U-K-A-R. Yep. And I was like, and shukra. Yeah. Oh, that must be. And then I was told, no, Jupiter's. I was like, okay, well, I think there might be.
I don't know that that's right. But, the beautiful thing about the Vedas and why India has always been such a haven for religious tolerance is that two people can be from the same religion or the same community, but completely disagree.
Right.
It's all up for debate.
Yes, true. I mean, this whole North Indian chart, South Indian chart, East Indian chart, and everybody has their preference, but we're all reading the same information, you know?
And ultimately it's not about that. It's about inner light. It's about the cultivation of jyoti. Jyoti is the eye of the Veda. And I think a lot of times when we study Vedic traditions out of context, which a lot of us do in the Western environment, because and in India too, because the Gurukula system, which is the basis of Veda, has been, broken down. We don't study Vedic knowledge in the context in which it arises. We study it through books, we study through teachers, we study through different transmissions, but we don't see the continuity with what the Veda is. And the Veda isn't just texts like books that we imagine in our mind.
Words.
Veda is words, even. It's Ritambara, the rhythmic code at the basis of creation. And a Vedic student will spend 12 years reciting that code, the syllables of the Veda in Sanskrit, creating an attunement with her physiology, so that by the time she's reached maturity, her body has stopped growing from the age of 5 to 17 or 4 to 16. She has become a conduit of pure light, which is the eye of the Veda, jyotisha. So jyotisha is not something we study outside of ourselves. It's something that is awakened within us through a highly technical and precise scientific process of making sounds. When you make the Sanskrit syllables, what happens is you activate certain marma points or pathways of energy within the vocal cavity. And when you do this repeatedly, infusing them with prana, when we exhale, we release all of our life force. Except when we chant in Sanskrit, we redirect that prana back, making the intelligence more lively within the nervous system, making the person, the disciple, the trainee in the Gurukula system, a conduit for channeled knowledge, for insight. So it's really like the intuition gets awakened first, then all this technical knowledge, like is Venus sugar, or is Jupiter sugar, is Uttarabhadrapada compatible with Hasta, all that stuff. But the knowing that comes when we connect with a chart, when we're reading somebody's dharma and karmic imprint, that knowing comes before knowing. That is available through spiritual practice. That's why traditional Vedic astrologers, jyotishis in India, always have a practice that puts them in alignment, that helps them to attune into the planetary and stellar energies.
Yeah, because we're an instrument and you have to tune your instrument, I mean, it's not rocket science, you have to, like attracts like, so you have to, I just started really getting into my mantras when the pandemic started. I mean, I'd done them before, but I tell you, this really gave me an opportunity to tune myself and find out which ones resonate with me, and just getting into the practice of doing the Navagraha, the Graha of the day, just to get you started and aligned, it helps so much.
Correct. Yes, it does. It does. And that's the tradition that Jyotisha comes out of. It's one of the Vedangas, one of the limbs of the Veda. So if we want to we can't cut off the limb, we have to see what the limb is attached to. The entire Vedic worldview, first of all, which is a quantum worldview. Jyotisha refers to the faculty of vision. How what I see determines my reality. This is quantum physics. The observer, in the process of observing, determines that which is observed. And Jyotisha is that science applied. It recognizes that the free will that we have as human beings in this intelligent physiology is the power of our attention. Where are you going to put it? Are you going to put it on the story you receive from your family or your, trauma or whatever, or the projections of your worth that have been put on you from all the external factors? Or are you going to put the power of your attention on your highest self? This is the technology that's offered with Jyotisha. It's like, no, see the, if you're a, Uttara Bhadrapada person like I am, like, understand what the lucky feet are, how they live in you, how that gives you an incredible opportunity in this human birth. Don't waste the power of your attention on like limited visions.
Yes, I agree. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about your background and what got you onto this path.
Yeah, it's a long story, so I'll try to be brief. But it began for me from a number of streams. One of them was in church as an 8-year-old child. My parents were war refugees, and when they came to
where did they come from?
From Eastern Europe at the end of the war. My dad was from the Czech Republic. My mom was from East Germany. And they came basically as teenagers, as war refugees, and started a life in America with, no family, nothing. And the church became, for my dad, a really powerful church family, a community that he really needed. And they also sponsored my parents to come to this country. So anyway, it happened to be a very liberal church, the United Church of Christ, and it was a very positive experience for me growing up, and especially because the minister was a civil rights activist and had marched with Martin Luther King, and he was really into the teachings of Gandhi. And so I first heard about Gandhi when I was a child in church, and I was so fascinated because I had grown up with these war refugees who had experienced absolute horrors growing up as children in the war. And it just blew my mind that a country could win its independence without firing a single bullet. Like, that nonviolent revolution is possible, that we don't have to suffer like, my parents and grandparents and great grandparents, the whole history of Europe, basically.
Well, and I mean, after during the Revolutionary War and the Civil War, they just burned the cities down.
Yeah. I mean, we're at
last summer,
end. I mean, we're at the end of a long line of inherited pain. And I found in the teachings of Gandhi that were presented to me in church something that opened my eyes to India. And I was like, India, I will meet you one day. I remember making that vow as a child. And then later on, when I was a teenager, I had a near-death experience. And I became inconsolable at this experience and didn't really understand what was the value of life. And this was my senior year in high school. And one of my teachers handed me a copy of an autobiography of a yogi, which is Swami Yogananda's biography. It's, if you haven't read it, you must read it. It is a beautiful, beautiful, inspiring book written in or translated in all languages in the world.
And the audiobook is incredible, and it is recited
I
by
think it's
Ben
in,
Kingsley.
yes. Oh, you've heard it. Yeah,
I'm finishing. I'm about
beautiful.
I'm about 2/3 of the way through.
It's a beautiful, beautiful story. And so for the first time in my life, I got exposed to this idea of yoga, of enlightenment, of something that can save us from suffering, from pain, that, you know, I had grown up in. And I had grown up in the wake of the American Vietnam War. I was born in 1968. I mean, this was a big, you know, time of healing also. And Yogananda's teachings were really powerful to me. And that was when I was in high school. So I got really inspired to go to India to meet this Babaji that is featured in the book. Yogananda's guru's guru had a meeting with this immortal yogi who predicted many things, among them that yoga would become wildly popular in the West and then would come back to India. And I was like, I gotta meet this guy. I gotta do yoga. I gotta find Babaji. And so I dropped out of school and went to Nepal. This was 1987. And I had a one-way ticket to Nepal, never been there, knew nothing about it. I thought the Himalayas, where Babaji would be in Nepal. So I was like, if this is my last bit of life on earth, I want to know what it is, the reason why we're here and why we die. I mean, it just became an obsession for me. And so I went to Nepal, and I mean, everybody was freaking out, my family and whatnot.
Well, yeah. And what year was this?
Yeah, 80. It was way before, globalization. And also, I mean, I was a young woman. I mean, I was just, I think, barely 18. But I just was like, this is my thing. I must find this. And as a result, I ended up in Kathmandu, and I was taken in by my Nepali language teacher's uncle and his family, who lived in the village of Balaju outside of Kathmandu. And it turns out he was one of the priests at the really, really famous temple in Kathmandu, the oh God, now I've forgotten it in this moment. Jeez, that's terrible. You guys know what I mean. But anyway, that's terriu It will come back. But this is my mind. It's a but anyway, so I lived with this family, and every morning at 4 a.m. he would the uncle of my teacher would start reciting Vedas in Sanskrit. He was instructing his son, who was about 5 or 6 at the time, in how to recite Vedas and memorize them, so that he could also be a priest.
Wow.
And I was in the room next to their puja room. Hindu people usually have a little puja, what they call a puja or puja room in their house, where they go and worship. And in this case, it was right next to the room I was staying in. So I would hear this rhythmic Sanskrit being chanted, and it awoke something in me. I felt like I must know that. I must have that. And so he started teaching me along with his son in the morning. And I just, I didn't even know what it was. I just listened and repeated. And then at one point, he said to me, Katie, you should go back to America and get a degree in Sanskrit if you love it so much. And I was like, oh, I don't want to go to college. But I did. And so I ended up going back to America. I started taking Sanskrit at the University of California in Santa Barbara, which was not bad. It did not suck. I spent 13 years in lovely Santa Barbara studying Sanskrit and religious studies in the renowned religious studies department at the university there.
Wow.
And the best minds of all religions. It was such a blessing. Thank you, UCSB. And also during that time, I got beautiful boons from the Ford Foundation, from the Fulbright Hayes Foundation to return to India and study. The University of California also gifted me money. I had several beautiful opportunities that allowed me to go back to India and study with Vedic scholars and Vedic experts of Sanskrit as part of my studies.
Wow.
In addition to some other really cool things. But that's how I got into Sanskrit. And when I finally finished my degree, I just, I didn't want to teach in academia. I started off in academia. I taught at Naropa University, University of Colorado in Boulder, other schools, Simpson College in Indianola, Iowa, next door to you.
Wow.
Different colleges where I taught religious studies. But at the time, this was in the early 2000s, yoga teacher trainings were taking off in America. And I felt like there was room, especially there were so many women. And I have to tell you the story. I hope I'm not talking too much about
No,
myself.
honey, this is your interview.
Okay.
Look,
Okay.
let me tell you, Sand people tell you I have a very bad habit of interrupting. And so if I'm not saying anything, then you are captivating.
Cool. I just don't want to blather on.
No, honey, this is all you.
But you had asked me to talk about being a woman.
Yes.
And a woman scholar of a very patriarchal tradition of knowledge that is the Vedas. And it's also a very exclusive club. I mean, even
Jupiterian.
Yes, and even within India, I mean, you have to be born into a lineage to be able to recite the Vedas,
right?
And to receive that education. That's not just it's not democratic. And so anyway, when I got my first scholarship to return to India, I had to locate a Vedic teacher and who would teach me. That was part of my grant. And in the traditional Adhyayanam call and response style.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a really, really hard time finding a teacher. It just, nobody was answering my letters. In those days, we had to send airmail letters to India. It was before the internet. And nobody was responding. And it was getting really down to the wire. And I was going to have to forfeit my grant if I didn't have a plan in place. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, 2 weeks before the deadline of all this, I got a letter in the mail. And it was one of these old, like some Indians who may be listening from that generation will remember, they're like these airmail letters that had to be glued and you had to cut them with scissors and then they unfolded. It was so funny. Anyway, he wrote this letter to me and he said, "Dearest Madam, when I received your inquiry about, studying Vedas with me, I tossed your letter in the bin. I threw it away." And he said, "But that night I had 2 dreams that made me change my mind. And the first was that his guru came to him, his teacher, who said, if this knowledge had been kept in the hands of women, it will never be lost." And then the second thing he said was to him, his teacher, that you will have a woman student and she will teach Sanskrit to oceans of ladies. There's oceans of ladies who can learn how to chant Veda. So
Tears
that's
are coming
how
in my eyes.
yeah. So it became my project in, after several years of academia, that I really wanted to get out and teach people that were practicing yoga. In academia, there's a real split between subject and object. And it's funny, in religious studies, you're expected to be neutral, especially when you study other traditions apart from Christianity and Judaism and Islam. Really, it's like, Hinduism, you're not supposed to become a Hindu. You're supposed to study Hinduism objectively. And so I didn't want to recreate that paradigm that was expected of me as a professor of religious studies. I wanted to impact practitioners. So I got into teaching Sanskrit in yoga teacher trainings, and I created a course called Sanskrit for Yogis, and I taught it live for many years, over a decade.
I'm sorry, I am going to interrupt at this point. Are you teaching? I saw this was on your website, and I was assuming it was like a recorded course, right?
It is. It's my Sanskrit for Yogis recorded course, but I think it's great because it gives the full first lesson of Veda, which I had to learn from my teacher, which is, even though I had studied Sanskrit in academia for 5 years before I started this kind of study, I thought I knew everything there was about grammar and everything, but he asked me to pronounce some line from Bhagavad Gita or something, and it was horrible. He goes, this is horrible. This is worst Sanskrit I've ever heard in my life. And God. with Veda, it's all about the sound. You have to make the sound to get the meaning and the feeling, and the rhythm. Get the awakening.
It's the rhythm of the word.
And the awakening that it imparts on your nervous system. So anyway, so I started Sanskrit for Yogis, and like you said, it's on my website, and I have many other chanting courses, goddess chanting courses, Lalita Sahasranama and Shri Suktam, which I'm going to be releasing with Diwali.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
I would love, and I know myself and several other people would sign up for this, if you did like a weekly class.
I know. And I would love to. My only problem is when I am in India, I live in a place with very, very limited internet.
When do you come home?
So it's hard. I come home periodically for, several months. Like I'm on the end of a 3-month trip back to the States. We're working all the time on getting better net. I do have an office near our place that I can get really good net, but the time is bad. It's fine for people in India, but it's, for you guys, it's the middle of the night. Right. So, but study groups can also be facilitated, and then when I come home. So, but to learn the basics, it's all there. And so anyway, I started doing that. And at the same time, I got into the study of jyotisha as a hobby. I started getting fascinated. I was suddenly free from academia. I didn't have to do all that,
right.
Grading
papers.
And grading papers and the whole thing. And the books that we used to have to read. Suddenly I got to be able to read things I was fascinated by, and I started getting really interested in jyotisha. And as I started learning, especially about the nakshatras, I was like, oh my God, all of my studies now make sense in a completely practical way.
Yes.
In a way that's healing for people, that's helpful. It's not just theoretical stuff I'm talking about in, World Religions 101. But the actual, application of this knowledge that's truly helpful for people. And so I started doing it as a hobby. And then my sister was going to lose her job. She was working for, at the time, a satellite company. And she was in a marketing department with all these women. There were 7 women in this marketing department, and they were all going to lose their job because of some, buyout of the company or whatever. And they were petrified, like, what's going to happen to us? So my sister said, well, my sister is studying astrology. She can read our charts. She's from Boston. Charts.
Yeah.
And so I read the chats of all these women, and they were all Cancer rising. They were all the varieties of Cancer. They were either Ashlesha, Pushya, or Punarvasu, each one of them. So of course they were stressed about, losing their security. And they were in broadcasting. They were in, dealing with the public.
And what was going on with where was Saturn at that time?
I don't remember. It might have been, they might have also all been in Sati Sati. So anyway, it just made me fascinated. And they told 2 friends, and they told 2 friends, et cetera, et cetera. And the next thing I know, I've got demand for jyotisha. And it was a lot more fun than teaching in academia.
Yeah.
So I was able to make that, leap and become an entrepreneur fully, applying what I'd learned in academia. And I hope in a way that has really brought voice to women, to be able to chant in Sanskrit, a domain that was originally only for very exclusive population.
Right.
Right.
Yes. And
jyotisha. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I found, being in Vedic astrology now, is that having women in this field is, relatively new, like within the last 50 years, and considering it's at least a 5,000 or more year tradition, you can see what we're up against, where, especially me, I like to do my hair and my makeup, and I like being girly, but it doesn't mean I'm stupid. I've got 2 master's degrees, you know what I mean? But it's like just the acceptance of women chanting, making that acceptable. It's going to take a while.
It's a deeply patriarchal culture that this arises from, and in the context it makes sense, but times are changing. Like the other reason that my teacher decided to teach me Vedic Sanskrit was because his son, who we would have taught, to, was more interested in, and the family was too, in pursuing engineering. So he ended up leaving and going to America to study engineering at the same time that I was coming to India to study Sanskrit. And so he was like, this is the way of the world, now's the age of women. And he was very enlightened about that. He was from the state of Bengal in India, in Calcutta. And Bengalis are goddess worshippers. So women anyway in that culture have a particular status, and he could recognize it. And it was wonderful for him to have that vision, to be able to say, yeah, it's worthwhile to teach her, and to, empower her, to empower those who are really embracing yoga in the West, who are women. 90% are women, and they should know the authentic traditions.
Yes.
Otherwise it is cultural appropriation, and people miss the whole context in which it arises.
Oh, thank you for saying that. That's something that, when I was, in ethnomusicology studying Arab music, Dr. Edward Said coined the term Orientalism. And Orientalism is racism in the media against people of the Middle East and Asia, making, stereotypes, cultural appropriation,
like snake charmers and magic carpet
just in yoga, making yoga a fitness, that's cultural appropriation, it doesn't mean that you can't get a good workout. It just means that your focus is on linking up. It's on learning, learning the real meanings of the Sanskrit behind the movements, behind the asanas that you're doing, not just doing hot yoga,
Yeah,
to get a
yeah.
workout. I mean, go on a run
But
if you want to get hot. Don't abuse somebody's tradition,
True. And there's a lot that we could say about that. However, these also are potent entry points for people. A lot of people have been awakened to the power of yoga, like in church basements and gyms.
I agree. I mean, they're moving. I'm just happy they're moving.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I mean, it's the same thing.
Moving with breath. It's a little different than doing, aerobics or whatever.
Right.
It's even in that context, it can have some value. But I really felt moved back in those early days, when yoga was starting to take off, that I felt that people really needed to know, where this all fits in.
Right.
And its application, which in the West has turned out to be money, it's turned out to be materialism.
Well,
but at the same time, Babaji, when he predicted all this in that's detailed in Autobiography of a Yogi, he said this should be given to householders. Prior to yoga's advent in the West, yoga was never practiced by materialistic people. It was practiced by renunciates and monks. So it's a big shift in the world, but it has benefits for householders. That's why it's here for us.
I think we're in Kali Yuga. Some people say,
yeah, well, there's that one. Also.
So, I mean, just a little bit of spirituality goes a long way,
True.
So
True.
I feel like, and it's the same thing with belly dance. Like there's this, there's traditional belly dance as, which is Oriental dance.
Yes.
It's the dance of the women of Arabia. And then there's, American tribal belly dance, which is cultural appropriation.
Yes.
But they're moving and I'm happy they're dancing. You know what I mean? So it's the baby steps. We just have to know that, okay, yes, I am taking somebody else's tradition and I am rearranging it. But as long as you say you're doing that, you're good. It's when they say, oh, this is traditional, but clearly it's not.
Right.
That's where the problem is.
Right. Or call it something that it's not. Right. I mean, there's a lot in that. But anyway, so that's a bit of my story. And then, it's really interesting because then somebody maybe perceptive was listening and saying, well, Katy, whatever happened to your search for Babaji that led you on this whole journey?
Yes.
And that has an interesting twist that began in 2009. I was in Sedona, Arizona, which is a big power spot. And I had a dream in which one of my first teachers came to me and said, Katy, it's been a decade since you've been in India. Now it's the time for you to come back. And it was so vivid. And I was like, okay, maybe I should plan some trip back to India. So I decided to take a group of yoga teachers on a pilgrimage. And we went on what's called the Chardham, the pilgrimage to the four holy places, which was a zoo. I hadn't been in India in a decade. I didn't realize everybody now had a car. Everybody had money now to go on pilgrimage. It was a mess. And I just was like, I'm never doing this again. I don't know what that dream was, but I'm done. But all my pictures were on social media. And my current husband saw those pictures at the same time that he was finishing the retreat center, Dunagiri retreat, where we both live now. And he was looking for, people who were connected with Babaji who would like to come and host retreats. So he got connected with me. It's a funny story, but anyway, we got connected and I found myself like typing in the URL of the retreat center, and front and center was the Babaji that had initiated my search with Autobiography of a Yogi. I was like, your place is opposite the cave that I thought was in Nepal. that sent me on this wild goose chase. And now I'm called home again. And I came back. So I organized the trip. I came back to India. I landed in Dunagiri, and I was like, "Oh, this is it. This is my home. This is my place. I need to be here." And now 9 years later, 10 years, 11 years later,
That's crazy.
we're married and I live there.
Wow. And you're still doing retreats, right?
Well, we are until COVID, but we're hoping things start opening up. And yeah, we are definitely doing retreats. We have a beautiful, beautiful place that Piyush has built, eco retreat, but designed on a combination of like modern California architecture and local recycled Kumaoni village homes.
Wow.
It's
That's
beautiful. It's
amazing.
stunning, and there's roses and garden everywhere, and we have 5 dogs, and it's just a wonderful place
Oh, I want to
in
visit.
India. Yeah, please. Well, most welcome.
Oh, I would love to. Wow. Well, you are an amazing woman and you're doing amazing work. And I love your Instagram posts. If you guys aren't following her, you should be. She's Dr. Katy Jane on Instagram. I will put the link for her website and everything below in the description. And what is your website again, so people know?
It's drkatyjane.com, DrKatyJane.com.
There you go. Check her out.
Thank
Check out
you
her courses.
so much,
And
Katya.
I'm going to get this video up before your thing tomorrow night because I want to get it out so that people know that you're giving this free workshop to talk about Lakshmi and Diwali and the 8 different kinds of Lakshmi and, just getting us ready for this holy time. And I'm so thrilled that you are here with me today. Thank you so much, Katy. And
thank you so much, Katya.
I will see you
Hindustan
tomorrow.
astrology. Yes, that's wonderful. Yes, I'm really excited. So thank you all so much for joining us and listening to all my stories.
Yes, thank you. Namaste and Hari Om.
Namaste. Hari Om. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.